So today we're going to be ranking the classes in Elden Ring, which is definitely going to be one of my more useless videos of all time, because the classes in this game, just like every other Souls game, they're pretty much just starting classes. They only really affect the early game and min-maxing your PvP build, and that is literally it. But the only things that these classes actually do offer is your base stats are different, and your equipment that you do start with is going to be different as well. They don't really offer any passive effects or anything like that. And as for your base stats, they're only really differ by a few points. So like at best, you could probably save like about 5 to 6 points in a certain build, depending on what you're actually going to go through. And 5 to 6 points doesn't really mean anything in a game where you can like easily get to like level 150 before you even end your first playthrough. As for the starting equipment though, everything that you do get with these classes is very accessible early on in the game anyway, so they're not even that unique to begin with. If you are a new player that is unsure, honestly, just pick whatever one you want. You're not going to really go wrong. If you've got a plan to change up your build a whole bunch, I probably recommend going with a WRETCH because you just start off at level 1. It's pretty basic and simple. But obviously, every single class does have its own uses because with particular builds, you're best off going with a certain type of starting class. So obviously, everyone has its own use, but for the sake of ranking, we're just going to do it anyway. But with that out the way, let's just get started. Starting off at number 10, we have the hero. Now, as to why this one gets at the bottom of the list is for a few reasons. One, it gets the battle axe, which is definitely going to be the worst weapon out of all the starting classes. Yes, even the wretch with the club is actually going to be a better weapon. It does get a pretty poor medium shield. As for the armor set, although it is nice looking, it doesn't really offer much defenses. Although, to be fair, fashion is more important, so who really cares? But as for the base stats, yes, it's going to be mainly into strength, which I guess is nice. But as for the other stats, it gets the lowest amount of mines compared to all of the other starting classes, which is not good because in a game where FP is going to be very important because your weapon skills and your spells are just going to be the meta, essentially. You're going to need to level up a few points into mind at least. It does actually get 11 arcane as well, and there's only like 3 weapons in this game they actually would use with a strength and arcane build. So for the most part, those 11 points into Arcane is kind of wasted stats. You'd much benefit actually leveling up your Faith instead. So if they actually had 11 points to Faith, it'd be a lot nicer because putting a few points into Faith to use certain types like damage negation spells or flame growing strength is always going to be very beneficial. But yeah, for those reasons, I put Hero at the bottom. Now at number 9, we have the Astrologer. Now this one is not too bad, but compared to the Prisoner, which is another intelligence-based starting class, the Prisoner is just going to be the better option for a few different reasons. One, with an intelligence build, obviously you're not going to spec into much faith. The Prisoner just gets less faith, so you're going to save a point in that regard. Prisoner does actually start off with more vigor, which is obviously going to be nice because vigor is going to be the most important stat, especially early game, because you're not going to really benefit much of leveling up your other stats. It does actually have more strength as well, which for most weapons actually have pretty higher strength requirements. So you're actually going to want to at least have a bit more strength. You do have the better weapon option with the S-Stock compared to the short sword with the Prisoner. And with the weapon option, the spell options that the Astrologer does get, both of them are actually accessible right at the beginning of the game. You can actually buy them off Sellen, which is literally a vendor in Limgrave. So the Prisoner is just going to be the better option overall for an intelligence build. So there is that. Number 8, we have the Bandit. Now, the Bandit does actually start off with the Great Knife, which is pretty decent because normally you would have to farm for that weapon. And it is actually going to be a bleed-based dagger, which can perform kind of well, but daggers aren't really the greatest primary options in this game due to their lack of range and lack of stagger potential. Other things that the Bandit does get is going to be a bow and a buckler, which is kind of cool, but you can actually buy those things pretty early on for very cheap as well. As for the base stats, don't really care for them much because it actually gets 14 arcane, which you're not going to really benefit off at all because there's actually nothing that really benefits off that arcane with this starting class. I guess like the only purpose of this is if you actually wanted to go grab the Reduvia really early on, I guess. But yeah, for the most part, those 14 points into arcane is useless unless you actually end up finding an infusion or a weapon skill or a weapon itself that actually does scale off arcane. And any single build that you do go with that's not intelligence-based, I always just recommend just going into a bit of faith anyway, just to get some damage negation spells or health regen spells. And with this starting class, you only get 8 faith, so yeah, for those reasons, I'll just put it at number 8. Number 7, we have the Warrior. Now, I'm not too sure exactly as to why this one exists because the Samurai exists, and they're both pretty much the exact same thing because they're both dexterity-based starting classes. The only difference is that this one actually starts off with dual curve swords, which dual curve swords are amazing to power stance. I guess trying to level up both of these things can be kind of annoying because they're both smithing-based weapons, and trying to get smithing stones can be a pain in the ass, but it's still pretty decent. But I think that the Samurai is just going to be better because you just get bleed, and you get a better weapon itself. But power stance and curve swords is cool, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. There's not much really to say about it other than that, you know, you get dexterity. At number 6, we have the Prophets. Now, if you want to go with a pure faith build, this was going to be like your best bet, I guess. As for the stuff that actually starts off with, the armor is just stupid and ugly. You don't really get much defenses with it. You can just buy stuff early on for armor sets, I guess, so it's not really a big deal. As for the weapon options, you get the short spear, which is a pretty decent spear because it does have a really cool heavy attack. You do get Catch Flame for a spell, which is definitely going to carry you throughout the entire playthrough, but you do get it pretty early on anyway. So it's not that big of a deal, but yeah, if you're going to go with a Faith build, I guess this one's kind of cool. It does get 16 Faith. I'd probably rather have some of those points into Vigor instead, because like having that many points into Faith don't really benefit much early game, or really get like later in the playthrough would you start really putting more points into Faith, but I don't know. Not much to say about it. At number 5, we have the Vagabond. Now, the Vagabond does actually start off with a lot of Vigor, which is really cool because you should just always put all your points into Vigor at the beginning of the playthrough, because you're not going to really benefit much of putting points into anything else unless you want to meet minimum requirements, which for this, you actually get 13 Dexterity and 14 Strength, which is kind of cool, although a lot of weapons only get like a 12 Dexterity requirement, so if you're actually going to go with a Strength build, you might actually have like a wasted point there, although it doesn't really make much of a difference. But as for the options that you do get the Longsword and you get the Halberd, so you get 2 different weapons, which both are pretty solid to have very decent movesets as well, and you do get 100 physical block shield. Also, I think like the only downside to this is that when you actually start off with this character, you actually are fat rolling. So if you're new to the game and you're unaware, you might be fat rolling. So I definitely just recommend like removing the Halberd or the Longsword, whichever one you actually do prefer. But yeah, I guess other than that, it's a pretty solid starting class. Number 4, we have the Prisoner. Now, as I was talking about before, comparing it to the Astrologer, I think this one is going to be your best intelligence-based starting class because, one, you do actually have the lower Faith stat at 6 Faith, and you do get better options as well because you do start off with the S-Stock, which is a very solid thrusting sword, definitely going to be one of the best thrusting swords. You do get a shield that you can poke alongside with as well, and you actually do get Magic Glint Blade. So Magic Glint Blade is going to be a nice spell that is good at hitting enemies that like to input read or just dodge all over the place. So that's really cool in that regard, because normally you do get Magic Glint Blade in Leonia of the Lake, so you actually can go through the first part of the game, or the first area of the game, with this spell itself, and actually go buy other things like Carry and Slice if you wanted to. So yeah, I just think that the Prisoner is going to be your best intelligence starting class. Number 3, we have the Confessor. Now, the Confessor is going to be another Faith-based starting class, but this one's probably more suitable for battle mages because you do get 12 into Strength and Dexterity, which is nice because a lot of weapons actually do have that as a minimum requirement. As for the equipment they start off with, they do get the Broadsword, which is a very high damaging straight sword that does actually get Square Off, which is one of the best Ashes of War in the entire game. You do get a 100% block shield, and obviously you do get a seal with some spells, which obviously you can get early on anyway, so it doesn't really matter in that regard. But the best part about it is that you get amazing drip. The armor set is so damn good. At number 2, we have the Samurai. Now, this is going to be your other dexterity-based starting class, very similar to the Warrior. The stats are pretty much identical, but obviously the differences being is that this one's going to have different weapons. So the Uchigatana is going to be your main option here, which is actually probably the best weapon out of all the other starting classes because it's a katana that gets very good damage, and obviously katanas get bleed, a very solid moveset, and this one actually does get unsheath as well, which is just going to be one of the best ashes in the entire game. Now, you also do get a longbow, but, you know, the longbow and the Uchigatana, you actually can get them pretty early on in the game, so it doesn't really matter, but obviously, being that it has, like, the best equipment, I'm just going to go with the Samurai as number 2. Number 1, the Wretch. If you're just unsure about whatever you're going to choose, just go with the Wretch, because you start off at level 1, you're not going to have really any wasted stats at all, and you can just change up your build freely throughout your entire playthrough if you actually want to switch to different types of builds. If you want an intelligence build and a faith build, just going with this one is going to be a very solid option because obviously you have that versatility. And the weapon that you do start off with is the club, which is actually not even that bad of a weapon because it actually gets a relatively quick moveset, and hammers do decent poise damage as well. Obviously, you're going to be naked, so just pick yourself up an armor set. There's actually plenty of armor sets early on. You can actually like buy the entire knight set at the round table hold if you wanted to, but yeah, the Wretch is going to be the best because of that versatility that you do get. Anyway, that pretty much concludes it for this one. That's the end of this useless ranking video. If you're a new player that's still unsure, literally just pick whatever one that looks the coolest to you. It literally does not matter. If you're still confused about certain things, just let me know down in the comments. Ask there, or you can pop by on my Twitch channel because I am going to be live every single day, so you can ask questions there. And I do have like hundreds of videos on this game, so you can go browse through that if you're stuck with anything in particular. But yeah, that's the way. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.